A nice, healthy dose of nostalgia for me and many, many others. However, there are people that were never able to call that nostalgia because basically they were born after the game was actually completely relevant and everything, after the console generation or after the game, and with all these new remasters coming out of these older style games, for example, the new Crash Bandicoot remaster and the new Sonic Mania that's coming out that's basically remodeled after the older games and like has new levels and that sort of design and stuff like that. It kind of brings me to a point to where some people are playing these sort of remasters and everything, and it's their very first time ever experiencing it. And that is mind-boggling. Like I always say, remasters is a great way to bring it to a new audience, but we're actually seeing an era now to where we're seeing games that were all the way from back in my childhood being remade and rebuilt and revitalized into the modern era. And so today, Michael here, and today we're going to be showcasing Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I wish the title screen would have came up here, but I forgot you can't really skip that. There it goes. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which was technically my very first game I ever played, and it came out during my birth year, which was 1992. Now, I know some people are going to be a little bit older than me, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, well, I played on the Omega and all that sort of jargon. Don't worry, I played on those too. But when I was growing up, we actually had the greatest and newest console, which was the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, depending on where you were at. And so basically, I was able to actually play a lot of great Genesis games as my very first experiences. For example, Sonic, and then I played Mortal Kombat, which, parenting advice aside, yeah, I played a lot of great games on that Genesis, and the Genesis actually had quite a few interesting titles. That said, though, one of the best games ever has held up is the Sonic franchise. Now, it did end up playing on the Nintendo consoles as well. I did play all the Mario games and stuff like that. However, when I end up going back to play a lot of these older games, they always feel old and archaic, and they always have these sort of older mechanics and things that it feels very of its time. Then I look at Sonic. I could play Sonic today and I would have no clue when it came out, aside from its graphical kind of held back because of the resolution that it runs at. It actually plays like a modern and perfectly great platformer today. Like, you see all these indie games coming out and there's like, oh, we got pixel graphics and stuff like that. All of them look like garbage in comparison to Sonic the Hedgehog in a lot of cases. Not all. There are some great looking games out there, but this game just feels absolutely fantastic. It's like a AAA. It's like a AAA went indie in the modern day. This is the kind of platform they would make. It's absolutely fantastic. And it holds up extremely well. If you're somebody who likes platformers, this is a game that's definitely worth checking out. Now, it's obviously not, perfect. It has a lot of older design flaws and things like that, and it's not a game that's like, oh, it's glitch-free and everything. Actually, the older Sonic games had a ton of glitches, and there's actually a lot of exploits as well. But it was the very first game that I ever saw, and I'm sure there was one before it, but it's the very first game that I saw that was fairly relevant, that actually had momentum mechanics. And I'm talking legitimate momentum mechanics, not a timer-based system like Mario, but rather just a system where you actually have genuine momentum when you're going downhill, and you lose momentum while you're going uphill, and you actually use that in the stage itself, and you can actually get through different areas and use it that way. And it's very, very interesting because the Sonic games, unlike a lot of older style platformers that end up kind of getting overturned by newer games that end up coming out and end up being better than everything, it's one of those games that there isn't anything like it. There's no other games that come out and they're like, oh yeah, this is like Sonic, and then it actually ends up feeling like Sonic. It has a very original and unique feel to it, and it's actually held up extremely well to this day. Not only graphically, because obviously the pixel graphics is top-notch for its time. It's obviously limited in its color palette, and it does look a little bit pixely because it is out of date. Obviously the resolution they actually had to work on was pretty dang low. In fact, it was like one of the lowest resolutions I could think of to actually have games that would actually look pretty good today. Like, this is probably the lowest resolution you can end up getting to where you can be like, yeah, games look pretty good. Because if you go any lower than this, you actually run into problems where, you look at the NES games and stuff like that, and, you can obviously tell it's old enough. But you get to this resolution, you're like, oh yeah, you know what? You can make something that looks fairly competent. And they actually had some fairly decent looking games on the Genesis. But Sonic, especially, looked absolutely fantastic, and it's one of those games where this is what AAA games used to be, and it's what we wish AAA games still were today, because AAA games today is mostly like, oh, we got all this production quality, but back in the day, it wasn't just about production quality, but it was actually about game quality as well, because the people that were able to make that production quality were the people who also had the design skills and had the experience to actually make fantastic games as well. You look back at, let's say Mario, for example, or Sonic, for example, and they're just great ones, or Final Fantasy. Those are games that were able to kind of maintain that sort of level of production while also having some great designs, some great stories behind it and everything like that. They were just absolutely fantastic in the way they were built, because that's what AAA games were. You had all those sort of B-team stuff and stuff like that, but they ended up being games that just don't hold up very well, and they kind of get pushed under the rug when you end up talking about older titles. And I'd love to go back and look at a lot of older titles, and there's a lot of games that I have nostalgia for, and I kind of want to go back and play Dynamite Heady eventually as well, because that's one game I haven't really been able to pinpoint somewhere, and so I hope I can find it eventually, because I don't have a copy of it anymore, which is a bit unfortunate. But those games don't really hold up very well, whereas Sonic just holds up extremely well. Like, it just feels like a modern platformer when you're playing it. You know, every once in a while, there's some emulation glitches on the Steam version that you'll run into, some graphical glitches and things, which is a little bit unfortunate. I wish it was one-to-one, but unfortunately it's not, and it probably never will be. I know some people have said, like, oh, well, don't try to run it through Steam. Actually use, like, an emulator, and they'll suggest, like, a few of them, like Fusion, I know is one that was recommended. But I don't know, playing it through Steam is the best way, and I can actually send some money towards the developers, and I kind of like that idea, and so that's what I ended up doing. And yeah, it's just, you're actually able to buy it as well. Like, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to showcase it today, too, is like, this isn't a game to where you have to go and find it or you have to use an emulator. This is a game that you can legitimately buy today still and actually play it. And Sega has actually been really good about that as well. There's a lot of classics that you end up playing. And while a lot of their classics not particularly great, I know people love to bring up Altered Beast. It's like, oh, I have so much nostalgia for it, but it's such a terrible game. Like, yeah, it kind of was a not very great game. But at the same time, you know, Sonic, fantastic game in every single sense. And there's actually a multiplayer component to this one as well. This one specifically, while it probably wasn't the very first game I saw, because I think the first Sonic is actually the first one that I ended up seeing, this is a game that I actually ended up being able to show to people first as well. And so basically, this was not only the very first game that I ever played, but it was the very first game that my older of my two sisters ended up playing as well. And she didn't actually play it solo. Oh god, am I gonna drown because I just accidentally screwed up a jump? Oh my god, I would hate to hear that sound again. Please don't play that sound again. Please do not. It's going to. Oh god. Worst sound in gaming, and it's terrifying. Oh my god. No. I'm sorry. I am completely distracted on not drowning. Okay, good. Anyways, as I was saying, she actually played it in the multiplayer aspect. And so there's a 2-player versus in this game. And it's basically, they actually have full stages. And there's only like 4 of them, or there's a special stage as well. And basically what it is like, it's the full stage with some slight modifications. And it has special power-ups and stuff like that. And you're just trying to beat your component to the end, which is a fairly interesting way to do multiplayer. And it's unfortunate the other Sonic games really never ended up doing that. I know Sonic 3 did this whole kind of, you're in this sort of arena thing and you basically have to do laps. It sucked. We didn't like it. And then I know Sonic 06 did it again, but you had to play as separate different characters, which was very, very meh, I would say. Sonic 06 in general was pretty meh. But anyways, back on topic, one interesting thing about this game, however, and it was very, very revolutionary for its time, at least from what I've been able to find out, even for Mario, for example, is that every single stage introduces new mechanics and new ways to kind of traverse the stage. And this was extremely interesting. And it's kind of like a predecessor, I would say, to things like the idea of Metrovania and things like that. I know Metroid Prime and stuff like that was before this, but I would say bringing that into a truly like platformer, like stage-based platformer, I would say that Sonic was the very first one to really end up doing it well. I know there were other games that ended up trying it, especially back in the day, like the NES and things like that. There was a lot of interesting platformers that are definitely worth looking into from back in those eras. But when it comes down to the modern design of video games, I feel like Sonic the Hedgehog was a very, very huge point to where it's like, this is what games can be, and this is what they should be. It's like absolutely just fantastic platformers overall. And I know I'm not playing particularly great in the background. I'm just kind of messing around, just kind of going with the nostalgia and stuff like that. And back in my day, when I ended up playing this game, getting to this stage specifically was kind of rare. Oh, I messed up. Oh, never mind. I can jump up that. I couldn't remember. This is a stage that every time I got to it, I was very, very excited. Now, eventually, I was able to just play through the entire game flawlessly, but I actually died a lot as a kid. I believe I have to end up running up to that one. I don't think it really matters to end up going the high route. I'm just going to ignore it for now. But this was one of those games where, you know, I ended up having a lot of practice with it as well. And it was one of those things to where it was very upsetting when I ended up getting a lot older, because a lot of people couldn't understand why I ended up loving this game so much. I remember we had a PS1, for example, and my friend would come over and it was like, we had it plugged in and we were going to play some Gran Turismo because that was the newest and greatest game, right? And then I unplugged it, right? And he was like, what are you doing? And I plugged in the Sega Genesis to show him Sonic, because I was playing Sonic. I was like, oh yeah, check it out. I can get to this new level and everything. And I got to the caves level for the very first time. And I thought it was so freaking cool. and basically he couldn't understand why I was so excited to show him this. I was like, why are you doing this? Because like the PS1 is like this new console, it's got 3D graphics and it's so cool and everything. He couldn't understand it because like it was just a new way, and we still run into that today as well. Like even with new games, AAA games have kind of fallen victim to this idea that to where they're just these giant production machines. But back in the day, you know, AAA was the way to go because it was just, those were where the great games were. And I kind of wish it was still the case today. Yes, there's a lot of great AAA games, and a lot of them are still fantastic. I know, but at the same time, I don't play a lot of AAA games these days because basically they've just kind of fallen out of favor. Anyways, back on to Sonic though, you know, one of the other kind of interesting mechanics that they actually have in this game as well is that a lot of people kind of have that misconception that, you know, Sonic is all about speed and it's all about going fast. And while you can go pretty fast through all these levels if you actually, you know, remember... Oh, god dang it, I fell into the water. I don't like being in the water because I don't want to drown. Hold on, I think I can run and momentum my... I can't momentum my way up that. Whatever, I'm just going to keep going and possibly end up drowning. Not 100% sure. It's just going to keep making me go underwater. We need to find air bubbles, though, because I will start to hear that beep thing, and then I will go completely insane. Bubbles. Also, Tails can steal your bubbles, which I found out a little bit ago, because I was playing through it a little bit, and I was like, oh, hey, he could actually steal your bubbles. It's quite unfortunate. And I am going really, really slow. I apologize for that. But yeah, it's like, you can actually go pretty dang quick in these games, especially if you end up knowing the stages and everything, so you can end up going through. I mean, one of the kind of holdbacks of this game is the fact that it was in 4x3, because that's just the resolution that we had back in the day. And so it kind of had one of those situations to where you would end up not being able to see what was on screen or coming on screen very, very quickly. And so it'd be like, oh, well, there's this thing all of a sudden inside your face. And you're like, okay. Oh, wow, that was weird. I kind of glitched off the thing there. Whoops. Whatever. I don't need my rings anyways. Come on. Oh, I can't jump up that high. Does his fire hurt you? I don't remember if his fire hurts you or not. I can't remember. I think that was only implemented in 3? I think so. I think 3 is the only one to where the fire could hurt you. Not 100% sure. Kind of having memory problems with this game. I mean, it's been a really long time, and some of them kind of mend together. I mean, the first 3 Sonic games, while they are completely different, they are kind of weird. But the thing about Sonic is that people that don't remember these kind of classic games is that this was actually a lot about precision. It was a precision platformer with momentum mechanics. It was a momentum platformer that actually relied on you being kind of precise in the way you jump. There's a lot of sort of platforming sections that you actually have to slow down and be precise with where you're going. And that's one thing that a lot of people kind of end up forgetting about the older Sonic games. And so when there's a Sonic game, for example, a lot of people were kind of looking at Sonic Worlds, or Sonic Lost World, sorry, looking at Sonic Lost World is like, oh, well, it's not all about speed. Sonic's all about speed. Sonic was not all about speed. In fact, Sonic was a lot about precision and being precise and kind of figuring out the best route. Most of the top routes, for example, are all about going up high, and you want to stay up high, and then you don't want to fall into these pits like I just did, which is very unfortunate. All right, I don't really like this stage. This is actually a stage I really liked as a kid. It's really, really kind of graphically awesome. But as like an adult now, I see all the design flaws, and I'm like, oh god, I don't want to get smashed. I see all the kind of like design flaws, and it's kind of annoying because you have those pinging things, so it's like, I just want to go forward. But at the same time, you know, that plays into the idea of, you know, oh, it's all about precision and stuff like that. It's not about, you know, just being perfect and speedy and everything. It's all about kind of precision. It is a precision platformer. And it's kind of unfortunate that a lot of the 3D Sonic games kind of forget that. Like Sonic Generations, for as great as it is, they did focus a lot on speed in that one, and that's a little bit unfortunate, because that is something that Sonic kind of has originally going for it. It has the whole momentum mechanic, and that is kind of cool to have and everything. But at the same time, I kind of miss the days where it was about precision and everything about that. You know, it is one of those things where it's just like, you know what, some of the older Sonic games had that precision element, and that is really, really enjoyable to play. Although this section, not particularly great. I don't know why, but I've always kind of hated the casino levels. It's just, the casino levels are always like the worst ones. Even in Sonic Lost World, I hate the casino level. It's just, maybe it's the pinger things, because it's like, oh my god, why did I jump? Why did I do that? That was mind-bogglingly strange. But once again, you know, new mechanics. As you can see, every single level in this game has new mechanics introduced, and that carries out throughout each single Sonic game. And that's something that they've actually held on to for every single Sonic game to this day. It is something that is very, very original. And one of the other things that's actually really, really cool about this game, and I've been skipping it until now because basically I didn't want to show it off, is the 3D special stages. I wish special stages would come back, because I really like special stages. I hope Mania has special stages. I'm pretty sure it does. I'm not 100% sure. I've been kind of keeping myself away from the media, but ultimately that's why I ended up showcasing this, because even though Mania coming out, Sonic Mania is coming out, and it's supposed to be like a revitalization of the older ones. But I kind of want to point out that the older games still hold up extremely well. And while this section, maybe not so well, because basically it's 2D images kind of trying to be 3D, and now that we have 3D graphics and everything, it's kind of weird, and the back of Sonic's head looks very, very strange. It looks like a hedge that was painted blue. But at the same time, back in the day, this was absolutely fantastic. And it's not the first 3D game I ever played. I think the first time I ever saw 3D was back in Phantasy Star, and even before then, there were games that had it. But once again, I was born in 1992, so, you know, my perspective is a little bit more inside of that range. But at the same time, like, this was really, really cool, and it's still really fun to play. Like, that's another thing to put in. It doesn't just hold up mechanically and graphically, besides this section, of course. It actually holds up, like, just in fun as well. Like, it's just a really, really fun game to play, and ultimately, that's what the series is about. I want to showcase games that are really, really fun, and games that are just good. Maybe not great games, maybe games that aren't perfect. You know, obviously, every single game is going to have its flaws, and since this is an older game, you have to run it through emulation, and emulation isn't exactly perfect, and even running it on that low-resolution kind of console and everything, on the Sega Genesis or Master Drive, depending on where your region was, you know, it's not particularly great, but for the most part, like, this game holds up extremely well. All three of the games do. I will say the first one has some more archaic mechanics, like you're not able to spin dash, which really, if you're speedrunning the game, you're not going to use it very often. Also, we got this mechanic, which I love. Oh my god, I got rings first time. I normally get Eggman first time because it's very, very annoying. But once again, like, I just wanted to show this game off because, one, it's very nostalgic for me. It's one of those games that I really, really enjoyed playing. And it's a game that I've been playing for years, and I still like to go back to it and play. And ultimately, that's why it belongs in this showcase series, because it's a game that I still go back to. It's a game that I'm like, hey, I want to go back, and I want to play a really great platformer. And I'm like, you know what? Let's play some Sonic. And so I'll start up 1, 2, or 3 and just start playing. Or Sonic CD as well. Sonic CD is actually quite fantastic. Although that one I have a little bit less nostalgic for, because it was actually a long period of time until I ended up playing that one, because we never had the Sonic CD. But regardless, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. And make sure to share your gaming memories as well with Sonic if you have them. Or maybe you didn't end up growing up with Sonic. Maybe you're a little bit too young, or maybe you ended up growing up with the Nintendo consoles. I know a lot of people like to say that Mario is their kind of child baby and everything, and they ended up growing up with that and everything. But I don't feel like Mario held up as well as Sonic has, because while Mario is quite fantastic and they are great platformers, aside from the first one, I think like Super Mario Brothers doesn't hold up that particularly well, in my opinion. I think it has a lot of archaic design that doesn't necessarily hold up well. I know a lot of people like to point to level 1. It's like, oh, well, these mechanics, you know, you learn how to play the game by literally the first level. That literally only worked because of the way the controller was designed. And so if you actually put that into perspective of any sort of modern gaming machine, it doesn't actually work that way, which is a little bit unfortunate. But anyways, once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully you've enjoyed the new sort of introduction to the series. This is the debut of the showcase, and so the showcase is all about showing off, like, not necessarily new games and not necessarily old games, but just games that maybe don't necessarily warrant getting a review out. Like, doing a review of the old Sonic games maybe particularly wouldn't be the best idea. I mean, I could do a retrospective, and I could have kind of played around with that idea. But at the same time, I just want to show off some great games, because not every game has to be perfect, and not every game has to be looked at in such a critical way. I just want to talk about games that are really, really fun and really enjoyable to play, and just kind of showcase them, as the name would suggest. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, like I said, and make sure to throw down your suggestions for the showcase. What are some games we should end up checking out? What are some guests I should end up having up on the show? I know I'm going to have some guests eventually on here to show off some of the... I'm going to skip that special stage, because screw it. Just go ahead and run over to the boss, which is in this little stage. Once again, the bosses end up changing as well. So every time you kind of beat the boss, I just love the boss designs in this game as well. Like, every single boss has a different way for you to beat it, and you use the new platforming section sort of areas to kind of do that as well. Like, let's say, for example, the first 2 bosses are fairly basic. Like, you get the first boss to where it's like, oh, you jump on the motorcycle. Yeah, that's pretty easy. And the second stage is like, oh, well, now there's moving platforms. But then it evolves and starts using the new mechanics. So, for example, this boss, you know, it has the flippers and everything that you can end up using to hit Eggman and keep yourself high up. And I keep getting hit by the bombs. I don't know why, but I'm playing very terrible right now. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and peace out, and I'm going to play a little bit more Sonic. I'm actually going to plan on doing a full, like, Let's Play playthrough, but I'm not going to be looking at the game critically or anything like that in that kind of video series. And so basically, I just wanted to go through, end up doing this as my first showcase. Showing off the very first game I ever played is kind of a good game to showcase, especially when it ended up being such a fantastic game in general, and is a game that still is worth playing today. So yeah, basically, look forward to the Let's Play of this if you actually have never played through them and you don't feel like playing through them yourself. Maybe you don't like platformers, but you still want to see what they're all about. I will have that eventually on the channel. And now we're on to the Hilltop Zone, and that means I'm definitely out of here. See you guys in the next video.